Welcome to Proof of PR, your passport to the world of public relations for teams building on-chain. I'm your host, Kelley Weaver, CEO of Melrose PR, a leading provider of crypto communications and PR strategy, and founder of BITWIRE, the modern newswire reimagined for today's comms professionals. Get ready for an inside look into the future of finance, technology, and entrepreneurship from those driving innovation in our space. Join us as we learn how they generate headlines, cut through the noise, and grow their brand awareness through media placements, press mentions, and thought leaderships. These are the stories behind their success. This is Proof of PR. Welcome to Proof of PR. Today I'm sitting down with the talented Evan Drake, founder of Soulcraft, creator of Opensoul, an AI marketing agency that runs itself. Evan has spent 20 years shaping brand narratives at companies like Apple and Chainlink. Soulcraft specializes in the new disciplines of AI search optimization and agentic marketing. And at the core of everything is something Evan calls soul.md, a structured identity file that teaches AI agents to sound like you. He describes Opensoul as an agency of agents built entirely around intelligent automation. What a time to be alive. I'm so excited for this conversation. Welcome to Proof of PR, Evan.
Thanks, Kelley. I appreciate you having me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation as well.
I'm honestly just fascinated with what you do. So really, really excited to jump in here. Can you talk a little bit about your background and journey? 20 years at Apple and Chainlink, and now you're building your own agency. What made you take the leap? Why now? And what problem are you determined to solve?
Yes, so I'm going to date myself here, but I started at Apple when it was Apple Computer, and there was no iPhone. And when I was at Apple, I read the first Bitcoin white paper, and I'll never forget that day. It blew my mind and helped me think about technology, helped me think about money and the economy in a totally different way. And I got really into Bitcoin mining on the side. And in fact, I even went to the first Bitcoin convention in San Jose. I wanted to go so badly, I didn't have any money to go. So I said, hey, can I volunteer? And sure enough, they said, yeah, you can take tickets at the door, come on by. And I showed up. And Bitcoin and cryptocurrency was always a hobby for me on the side of my career until it caught up with everything I was doing in marketing. And I eventually found myself at Chainlink Labs, where I was at for 4 years, and I was leading a marketing team, running our growth, focusing on core infrastructure of the cryptocurrency economy with Chainlink. And I was also acting as our chief of staff. And like the rest of us over the past 1 to 2 years, we've all seen the rise of what's happening with AI. And I started to shift with my thinking about what marketing is. And I started thinking more about marketing as an engineering discipline, engineering mixed with taste. And so started getting really interested in how we could change our marketing stack entirely and getting really excited about how I could then begin helping other brands, other companies with how they could think about their own marketing stack. And this is when I decided to make the leap and start my own agency, which, as you said, is called Soulcraft. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that and why I named it that. But at the crux of it is that I'm really interested in rebuilding the marketing stack for companies and helping them to prepare and get ready for this age of AI.
I mean, it seems like the timing is perfect. You describe Soulcraft as starting with the soul, not the surface, which I'm sure is what you're talking about, recreating the stack. Most agencies lead with logos and deliverables. What does it actually look like to start with identity, and why does that matter?
Yeah, so a mentor of mine in Silicon Valley here named Heidi Roizen once told me that brand is consistency. It's how you show up in the world over and over again. And it's why I cut my hair in a certain way or I wear this sweater often. It's that repeatable identity that you have and how you show up. And too often, what I see in companies that I've worked at and companies that I help, most people start with what everybody else is doing. Are they putting out information on certain channels? Do we need to kind of mirror the way that they look and feel with the brand design and the content? Do we need to make sure that we're standing up all of the right different content systems to make sure that we get the word out about the company? But what I really believe is that each individual, each person has a core identity, something that makes them who they are. It's what their values are, it's their tone, their voice, how they show up. And I have found that this soul for every brand is very important. And it's something that really for me is at the crux, the centerpiece, the foundation of every marketing stack that I'm working with. Because once you have that soul, once you can figure out what your identity is, then the sky's the limit. You can start designing all of the right systems around that to make sure that how you're showing up around you is really going to succeed in the market. And so starting with that soul is where I believe everything has to begin.
I love that. And it's natural that that would be kind of the source for the work that your AI team is doing. You have this concept of a soul markdown file, which is essentially a computer's identity DNA that all your AI agents inherit. Walk us through what goes into that and why it matters so much to the output.
Yes. So the Soul Markdown standard was actually something that has just started to emerge in the world of AI at the end of 2025. Anthropic was kind of the first company that put out its own Soul file, which was a description of what the actual AI believed in and what its values were overall. This concept of the Soul Markdown file was then popularized by Peter Steinberger, who is the creator of OpenClaw. And this idea is that at the base root of every agent, every AI agent, there is this single text file, a markdown file that can be really easily read by AI. And it's a file that contains information about the values, the vision, maybe the tone of how this agent shows up. And so this is an emerging standard, and it's something that I have seen becomes really important when you are creating your own agentic systems, whether they're AI tools that can speak on your behalf or maybe an AI that you're trying to build something with. And so it's really that DNA. It's something that is really important and foundational to giving that company its consistency, its tone of voice, its brand, its values, its vision. And that is a primary thing that I help companies with right away, is to create that soul file.
And then from there, what does it look like? How does this, how does it work? I'm just curious how, this is so new and novel that you've built this autonomous agency of agents. And I just want to dig into that further.
Yeah, absolutely. It does sound kind of crazy and futuristic in a way. And the truth is that the tools to be able to do this are actually already here. They're possible. It's just that it takes some engineering and it takes some ability to stitch some things together. And so we are moving from a world now where most people think about AI in terms of chat, right? You get into a conversation, whether it's ChatGPT or one of these other services, and you type in a question that you have, and sure enough, it comes back with an answer. What we've seen, especially over the early part of 2026, is that now this world is shifting to a world of agents. And the way this works is that you, instead of just typing in a question and getting that answer back, you can give that agent a project, a task, something that you want to accomplish. And then what you get back is a result. So instead of needing to do all of the work with this agent, you give it a set of things that you just want to accomplish. And then it's going to go out and figure out how to do that, just as an employee would do, and come back with a result. The way it works practically is that each agent has its soul file, which gives it the instructions for how it might operate. It then has a memory so that it can keep a log of all of the changes that you might make along the way, the preferences that you have. It has a set of skills that connect to other services out there. So, for example, if you want to make sure that your agent is connecting to Slack and be able to talk in Slack, it needs to have that connection so that it can speak the language of Slack. And then once it has the soul, the memory, the skills, then you can create these repeatable loops and you can schedule tasks so that, for example, every day at 8 a.m., it can go and check your email and then send you a summary of what's happening and potentially go out and actually create a dashboard for you of everything that's happening in your business with all of the different metrics going on. And those are just a couple of really simple examples, obviously, of what one of these agents could do. But once you start building these agents, you can then start to string them together. So you could have an agent that is a researcher, one that's a content writer, another one that specializes in your legal output. And this becomes a really modular system where, in a nutshell, what you end up doing as a marketer or as a business owner is orchestrating. You end up conducting all of these agents together, and that becomes the role of the marketer, is figuring out how to set these agents up so then they can work on your behalf autonomously, potentially 24/7. And so that's what I've been building at Soulcraft, and that is what I'm helping companies with today.
So you help companies architect the system that then deploys these agents on their behalf. So directors, strategists, creative, producer, growth, analyst, all the different functions within a company. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. I kind of like to think of myself these days as like a custom furniture builder. And what I find is that most companies have different ways of working. They have different processes, different people like using different systems. And so what's really important is to find the thread that runs through all of that and to engineer that system so that they can do their marketing in a way that is going to be most effective. And so I do build these custom platforms for different companies that I'm working with. And then, as you said, I've also released this tool called Opensoul, which is kind of my attempt at creating more of an open standard and open format for how companies might want to do this themselves and integrate it themselves. What I found is that with much of the complexity of creating all of these different systems, it's really important to have an operator and an orchestrator who's behind the scenes and helping to make sure that all of it is set up in the best way.
That completely makes sense to me. I think there needs to be a human expert like yourself and your team making sure that it all works as intended, I suppose, and setting it up correctly in the beginning. You mentioned Opensoul replaces almost $350,000 in annual marketing hires for $2,500 a month. It's obviously a bold claim. Can you walk me through that math? And is this really where the future is taking us?
Absolutely. Yeah. So think about it. When you are just starting up a company and you want to release your product into the world, or maybe you're even kind of starting halfway through with a company that's already released a product and now needs to figure out, how do we get this into the hands of more people and create more demand for it? You're going to need to have some different functions on your team to do that. First, you're going to need somebody who really specializes in design and figures out how do you show up with the look and feel of the brand. You're also going to want somebody with a totally different skill set in content, who knows how to speak and write and talk in your voice and be able to craft that over time in a way that sounds like you regularly. Then you're going to need somebody who's focusing on all of the different growth skills for how to move that brand forward with advertising and the optimization that's required to get that organic traffic and all of the direct marketing that you may want to do. And as you start to think about all of these roles and you start to think about how important PR is and how important all of the different direct relationships are and the email marketing and all of these different functions, which can be quite complex these days and require a lot of expertise. it starts to add up, and it starts to cost these companies quite a bit to be able to hire these people directly. And, especially if you're going to hire somebody in an annual contract or a salary, you're starting to look at some pretty hefty numbers, which requires fundraising and requires, some real capital to be able to deploy it. What I'm seeing is that oftentimes when brands are starting up, there's a more scrappy way to get going that can actually lead to even 10x, 100x the results. Because when you can employ the agents to be working on your behalf and work with these AI tools, you can actually spin up these different systems that are going to be able to execute much more quickly and potentially at an actual higher level of quality, which is something that often surprises people, but it is now possible with the tools that we have, and it is changing very rapidly. And the system that I have set up in my agency does charge some pretty low fees comparably to what you would see with hiring all of these people. And it's kind of that big build or buy question. And I'm a huge believer that in the world of AI, it's a really great route to go and buy the expertise who can set up all of these different systems for you.
It's just fascinating as a business owner. It's exciting at the opportunity to, because I agree with you, the way that things are headed, it almost feels like they can do a better job than humans in many examples and cases. And so it's just fascinating. I'm curious, we had a situation this morning. We rely heavily on Claude across our organization, and it was experiencing some downtime for us. Have you had, how early are we, and does that impact things at all?
Yeah, that's a major issue when one of these different systems goes down, right? And especially with the ones that are going to be more closed source tools like a Claude, for example, it is a problem. It can create a problem if there is downtime. And so this is one of those types of engineering questions that a lot of marketing teams are facing right now, and businesses in general are facing, is how do they make sure they set up their systems in the best way possible so that if there is downtime, they're still able to work and function in the same way that if Slack was down or if any one of these other tools that we use every day goes down, the company can still run. And so I expect that companies like Anthropic are going to continue to be adding on, that resourcing and capability to make sure that the uptime stays really good. I'm a huge proponent of Claude, and I'm using it absolutely, to the max in my business. And at the same time, I also look to open source software as well to make sure that I have some other means and other ways of driving this as well.
That all makes sense. And I think more will be revealed this year too, as these tools just continue to get smarter. It feels like it's happening so fast. It's interesting to hear you talking about just the end of last year. These soul files were sort of introduced, and here we are. It's not even 6 months later. So it's just wild how fast this thing's moving.
It really is. I heard somebody say the other day that you almost have to be unemployed just to keep up with everything that's going on in this world. Just like it's just changing every single day. And there's these major developments that are completely shifting entire industries, with one software update. And so this is also the benefit of an agency in my mind, because it's really important that you're working with a team of people who are seeing some of these changes and what's happening across the board and applying some of those learnings and making sure that companies are set up in the right way, because otherwise you can get pretty insulated sometimes with your own team and people in terms of understanding the best way to set it up. And so yeah, it's shifting so fast. It's just crazy.
It's unbelievable. I want to talk to you about AEO, GEO, AIO, AI search optimization, essentially. You have this concept of AIQ too that I want to learn about. For people who haven't heard these terms yet, what's actually changing? What should founders pay attention to? What's important here?
It's all these acronyms, right? There's so many different acronyms that are now circling around. And so let me just break this down kind of in a simple way to help everybody understand how I think about it. So we're in a new world now with one way of maybe describing it is SEO 2.0. In the old world, users, customers would type in what they wanted, as we all know, to the search engines. And over time, marketers started to figure out how to change the rankings of different companies that were within those search engines. And of course, then there was the rise of advertising to make sure that you're showing up in the best position. Now what's happening is that, of course, when you type in that query to a search engine, you may not even see the first results until you scroll more than halfway down the page, because the first thing that you typically see is an AI answer. And this is the world of AEO, which is answer engine optimization, where that first result, that first thing that's showing up sometimes in the very top is that quick answer. And in addition to that, many people now are not even going to the search engines. They're not even looking at a website anymore. And so websites are still important in this new era, but they're not as important, right? Because now, like many of us, we're just interacting with the LLM directly. We're just trying to figure out, what do I need to know? And we don't really care about visiting the website as much as we once did. And so this is the world of GEO, which is generative engine optimization, where you can also influence the answers that are in those results. And all of this is a little bit different than it used to be with SEO. And I'm happy to get into that more, but this is something that is a new marketing discipline that is becoming important for, as I'm seeing, just about every single company that's out there. We're in a complete shift that's happening right now. The old ways of getting information across about what your brand is and what you're all about is completely shifting into this new world, and it requires an entirely different way of thinking about marketing.
Most newswire platforms were built for a different era of PR. Mass distribution, bloated pricing, coverage that looks impressive but rarely delivers real visibility. BITWIRE was built to change that. We give modern PR teams direct access to curated Tier 1 publishers that actually reach your audience, from leading crypto and business outlets to global financial media. Instead of blasting your news everywhere, BITWIRE focuses on quality distribution that builds credibility, authority, and search visibility through real placements and permanent links. Every distribution includes guaranteed publication, so you know exactly where your story will appear with no uncertainty and no wasted spend. Our platform lets you create and distribute a press release in minutes through a clean, intuitive workflow designed by PR professionals who understand what's at stake every time you hit publish. With fast turnaround times, your announcement moves quickly from submission to live coverage, helping you stay ahead of fast-moving markets and news cycles. No confusing subscriptions, no unnecessary spend. Just transparent, a la carte pricing so you can choose exactly where your news appears and scale as you grow. And when you need support, our team delivers unparalleled customer service at every step, from submission through publication, ensuring your release runs smoothly and successfully. Because today, it's not about sending your news everywhere. It's about placing it where it matters. BITWIRE, your news amplified.
We've seen a huge shift as it relates to PR in this area, because the way that individuals and audiences are finding information has completely changed. And so the work we do doesn't really change, but the way that people find the work that we're doing is changing drastically. And it's almost made PR more important than ever, in a way, from, a thought leadership narrative perspective, and then from a BITWIRE tool perspective of getting your announcements into the right channels. It's exciting, and it's crazy because it's changing so fast. So we've definitely experienced it too.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is shifting rapidly. And I have used a number of different tools to take a look at this problem, because it requires a new way of monitoring what's actually happening within these answers. First of all, you have more than 8 different LLMs that are out there to be tracking that people are using. And then not only that, the answers change depending on the persona who's actually asking the question. They change, based on the way that the person is asking the question. And so this requires a lot of monitoring, and making sure that you have a really solid tool in place to be able to check that is really important. the tool that I use with the brands that I work with is called Scrunch. And I really believe it's kind of the Lamborghini of monitoring tools that are out there. But even beyond the tool, you've got to know how to drive. You need to know, it's like figuring out how to drive stick shift and figuring out how you can influence these answers just beyond the monitoring itself becomes really critical. And that's where we are very interested in and working very closely with brands on influencing those answers.
That's a hot tip, because we're currently building case studies to prove that earned media influences LLM results. And we're having to sort of beta test across the different, asking chat, then asking chat a different way, then asking Claude, and just going and showing what pops up. But I'm definitely going to check out that tool that you mentioned.
Absolutely. It's a great one to look at. And just in full transparency, I do work closely with Scrunch, and I'm a part of their co-marketing platform as well. But I'm happy to work with any companies that are interested in getting onto that platform. And I work from an agency perspective, which means that I have some additional tools to be able to help brands do that.
So you've said that at Soulcraft, you can place brands directly into a high intent AI conversation. What does that mean in practice, and how is that different from traditional SEO as we used to know it?
Yeah, so this gets into that other acronym that you mentioned that I'm calling AIQ. And I think of AIQ as your AI quotient for a company. And there are really three things that are important when you are thinking about your results as a brand within AI. The first is your presence. Is your brand actually showing up when people ask the question or type in what they're looking for or wondering about? Is your brand actually in the response? And so that's the first thing. That's your presence. The second thing is the sentiment of the response positive about you? You want to make sure that it's positive as much as possible. You don't want it to be negative about what you're doing. And then finally, the third thing is the position, as you were describing. Really important to show up high in the answer versus buried in the bottom of a long answer that people may not read. And so with those three factors, this is something, again, that I have kind of created a working algorithm for that I'm calling the AIQ. And any company that is interested in learning more about their AIQ can visit my website at soulcraftagency.com and just type in their website and get a free report that will give them their AIQ. And so this is something that I really believe in. It's a place that companies need to start with to think about how are they showing up.
So you're already placing products inside ChatGPT and Perplexity through AI advertising. This is something that I didn't even know existed. So what does that look like, and who should be paying attention?
Yeah, so I'm so excited to talk with you about the world of AI advertising, because we are not even in the first inning of this. It is very early days still, and this is an emerging discipline that is going to be evolving, I expect, very rapidly. It is also a controversial area. So just to be clear, some companies have taken the stance of not allowing any AI advertising, which we'll start with the first example, which would be Anthropic. So we probably all saw the Super Bowl halftime commercials with Anthropic saying, look, this whole AI advertising thing, it's kind of laughable. It's not what everybody wants. However, I'm a believer that the cat is out of the bag on this one. And the world of AI advertising is going to exist. ChatGPT is now making it possible. OpenAI has turned the funnel on for advertising. And it is indeed now possible to advertise within ChatGPT, as well as other services like you mentioned, such as Perplexity, and even third-party networks that are starting to emerge. This is a world that I've become very interested in, and really excited about the future of this for marketers, advertisers. And yes, it is possible to now do this. working with clients around this, and happy to talk with anybody who's interested in learning more.
Do you think it's a smart move for brands to be paying attention to this now and thinking about how they can put together budgets for AI advertising? Is that where things are headed quickly in the speed that we've seen like the products evolve over the past 6 months?
I do think it's important for companies to start forecasting for this. And I'll talk a little bit about why I think that is. For now, I'm seeing that it takes quite a bit of budget to advertise within some of these tools. For example, ChatGPT has minimums that brands can spend on their platform, but I expect that those minimums are going to rapidly come down. And I expect that these platforms, potentially by even the time this episode is released, will eventually have self-service platforms as well, in the same way that we're used to having self-service work for Google advertising and other platforms. It is an area that a lot of companies are interested in, particularly because it is emerging, and there's still not a lot of data out there on what's working and what's not working. However, this is one way of standing out. This is one way of potentially doing things a little bit differently than everybody else. And especially in an area where there's a lot of surface area to be able to advertise with all of these different prompts, there are going to be new strategies that emerge around this. And I expect that within the next 6 months to a year, we're going to see this discipline of AI advertising emerge to the point where many companies will likely have their own AI advertising team of people that are solely focused in the same way that we would think about companies having a social media team or a growth marketer, for example, who is running advertising in other platforms. So this is a really exciting area. It's definitely emerging fast.
How much are you paying attention to chatter on Twitter about AI tools?
Oh, I'm plugged in. I'm dialed in every day. That's one of my sources of truth for exactly what's happening. Yeah, that's where the Wild West is getting discovered.
Well, because my feed has become a use these prompts to, I'm sure yours is a little bit more technical than that. Have you tried using these prompts? And it's just like, I'm bombarded every time I open Twitter. That's all I basically see. So it's just fascinating.
It really is. Yeah. And it's really helpful as a marketer to be able to follow some of these companies that are developing new tools around this, or influencers who are kicking the tires and trying out new ways of doing things. And yeah, this is absolutely a channel where I get information on what's changing, because as you said, I feel like I sit in front of my computer and I could just wait for an hour and there's going to be some new software update that's going to fundamentally change the way that we all work.
Well, furthermore, it feels like Claude has become the default this year, whereas that wasn't the case last year. There's just, I think Anthropic has done a lot, but it's interesting that they've come out and claimed that they're not going to do the advertising. I mean, listen, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I'm curious if you think that these companies might pivot their strategies as things evolve.
Yeah, I love that question. And I actually have an example, a thought experiment for this, which is I have my kind of Patagonia hat here, right? Which I'll just put on. And, if you think about it in the world of AI advertising, it's all about persuasion, right? It's all about what's the answer. And so as of today, in most of these systems, when you're doing AI advertising, most of these companies are breaking out that result in a nice little box at the bottom, or some other kind of modal that's going to make it really clear that this is an advertisement. However, you could imagine over time that some of these maybe open source models or other types of systems may start to experiment and adapt with actually embedding that advertising directly within an answer. And this gets really interesting as a thought experiment, because over time, you may not really be able to tell that you're being advertised to. You're just getting an answer. And in the same way that I might show up with a Patagonia hat, and you might think a little bit differently about me or be intrigued by, the brand that I'm associating with, I expect that over time, a lot of these companies will start to see that there is a lot of value in potentially embedding some of these brands within their answers. And I'm making no claim about whether I feel like this is right or, ethically the best way or not. I'm just seeing that it's a reality. It's going to be something that people are experimenting with because there's real value in it. And so then the question becomes, how does the end user, how does the consumer control that advertising? Because some people will not want to be persuaded. They will want to make sure that they're getting that raw, unedited, global view of whatever the LLM is supposed to tell them. But there are other people who may want to be persuaded. And in fact, if the AI knows you better than in some cases you may know your own preferences, it might actually have some good suggestions for you. And it might actually give you a set of recommendations of things that you hadn't considered or thought about. And so there could be real value there for people who potentially are open to being persuaded in some way. And so I think of this as kind of like a dial that's emerging that perhaps eventually end users will be able to control themselves and decide, you know what, I don't want to be persuaded anymore by this AI. I want to turn that down. Or, you know what, I'm open to seeing answers with other companies that I've been marketed to. And so I know that's like very futuristic and a little bit nerdy and science fiction to think about, but I do think that this has major implications for our field and discipline in thinking about how we show up. And I do see this as an emerging thing. I expect that there will be lots of shifts around this, and that potentially companies that aren't taking this on today may have a change of mind when they see how much value is being created around it.
I think it's already here. I mean, the way that we've seen the Google search results visually change from, sponsored results and then regular results, and now there's a whole AI section giving you your answer quickly. And so we're kind of becoming more desensitized to that. And then also, when you were talking, I was thinking about how I've sort of trained my Instagram algorithm to feed me stuff that I like. And so
Yeah.
I love being able to go in there because it's all very positive manifestation.
Yeah.
Like, it's all really good. I've trained it to be very positive.
Exactly.
And so
Yeah.
I like that my algorithm knows me and feeds me things that resonate, that I enjoy. So I can see both sides of this. I agree with you that it's a really strange thing to think about. I didn't know that this was a brand that's trying to capture my attention here, but wouldn't it be better if it knows me versus you, Evan, and knows what to feed us? So I'll be really interested to see how this plays out. I like the idea of a dial that we have some control over, because on Instagram, for example, obviously that's their algorithm, but you can say, I don't like this, I do like this, and you can actually remove certain things that it's feeding you that it thinks that you might like. So you do have some control, I think. People may not know that, but you do.
Yeah, that's so well said. And you're exactly right. These AI systems are already here. They're already operating in the social media platforms that we're all used to. It's just that we're not chatting with the algorithm directly. And so what the shift is now taking place is that now you have the ability to, in a nutshell, tell Instagram, you know what, I'm seeing too many of these advertisements now, and I don't really want to see those anymore because I'm not really into X, Y, or Z. And so imagine if you could actually interact with the algorithm itself. That's exactly what LLMs are in a way. Is they're going to be registering your interests, your behavior, your memory over time, and really becoming a partner in a way of helping you navigate the world, helping you figure out what it is that you care about. And so if you can give that partner a set of preferences and you're okay with being persuaded sometimes, it could be really valuable for you as an end user. And at least for me, I'm probably somewhere in the middle of those two extremes, right? I don't want to have something that's just constantly telling me something new that I've heard about that maybe doesn't relate to what I really care about exactly. but I'm also open to hearing about things that might align with my interests, that might be kind of niche and, different from what everybody else is going to see.
I mean, the whole thing is fascinating. This has been such a great conversation. I do want to ask about, before we wrap up, so you worked at Chainlink most recently, and I watched, the audience for Chainlink now is much more institutional. And I feel like that's reflective of the entire crypto industry. And what I've heard is that institutions are hiring consultants to figure out, okay, what custody provider should we be using, or which tools within crypto are the most trustworthy, and these consultants are referencing AI, right? And so the winners are being picked by those that are showing up best in AI search, because the partners that are at these big high profile consultancies are using all the tools that everybody's using now. And so I heard from someone that they got selected over someone else because the LLMs weren't able to pull some of the information that they actually do. I guess my question is, how should brands be thinking about this in crypto? Because we're marketing much more to institutions now, and we need to be, coming up in search, in LLM search,
Yeah, absolutely. That's really fascinating, because in the past, these institutions have been such small operations with a small number of people. We think about them as these big entities, right? These large conglomerates of, lots of people working at some large institution that we all know and love. But that the other side of it is often one or two people who are making these big decisions for crypto blockchain companies and other financial players, as well as many other different parts of the economy. And as you said, at the other side of things, everybody's using AI because it's often what is giving us a result that's potentially better than what we might come up with ourselves from our own connections and networks. And so this type of expertise is still incredibly valuable. But what is really important is figuring out how to make sure that your identity, your brand are showing up in the way that you want it to within those answers. And we started getting very interested in this at Chainlink. And it's one of the reasons why I started to gain a lot of expertise in this area, because we started to get very curious about how we could make sure that we were showing up in the way that we wanted to.
Well, it's fascinating. I am excited to use the tool that you referenced on your website for AIQ to get a free report, and I encourage all the audience to do that. Sounds fascinating. Where can we keep in touch with you and learn the latest developments, or work with you?
So I am on all of the channels that are out there. I'm a marketer just like the rest of us. So you can pretty much find me anywhere with the handle I am Evan Drake. And I'm most frequently on X and LinkedIn. And so please reach out. Happy to talk with anybody who's interested in this subject or looking to influence this with their own company. And then, as you said, my website is out there at soulcraftagency.com, where anybody can get that free report that I mentioned on the first part of the website. Just type in your URL and then hit the get report button, and you'll receive that. And my website is really the crux of my activities as well. I'm also working to use these same types of methodologies for my own brand in trying to grow it. And just as an example, I have automated my blog entirely so that it's out there finding new search terms, looking for keywords on what might be important. It is then creating content for me on the fly based on my standards and the voice that I'm working with, and then brings me into the loop to just kind of provide that final check off that I'm happy with the results, and automatically publishes it for me. So it's one place where you can kind of see an example of this and how I'm doing it today. And happy to help any brands that are out there in their own discovery of some of these processes.
So fascinating. Thank you so much, Evan. This has been a great episode. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Kelley. Really great to be with you.
Thanks for tuning in to Proof of PR. This episode was brought to you by BITWIRE.com, the modern newswire reimagined for today's comms professionals. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen today. To stay up to date on upcoming guests and news, visit proofofpr.com or follow us on Twitter at proofofpr. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and hodling.